Hey everybody, it's your girl Planet Ty on deck. I hope you guys are having a great day, afternoon, and or evening whenever you guys are seeing this, so check it out. Today I am telling you guys about crime. Specifically, a true crime story that you might have never heard of, okay? Because it took place in the 16 and 1700s, okay? Now, this is a story about a woman named Giulia Tofana. And if you guys want to hear the information that I put together about the part that she played in history from back then, all you guys got to do, stay tuned. Okay, thank you guys so much for coming back and being on deck and joining me for this true crime. Now, without further ado, let's jump on in. So, Giulia Tofana was born in 1581 in Palermo, Italy. She was known as an Italian professional poisoner. Now, I want you guys to light up the comments and let me know, have you guys ever heard of that as a profession before? Now, I know this is long time since any of us were born, but have you guys ever heard of that at any time in history, that somebody could actually be a professional poisoner? This was the first that I heard of it, so I knew I had to share this true crime with you all. Light up the comments and let me know. Now, Toffana was a Sicilian woman who lived and worked in Palermo in the first half of the 17th century. During that time, women didn't have many options for survival. They were mostly at the mercy of their husbands if married, and had to tolerate violence and verbal abuse on a normal basis. If a woman was unwed, she was likely a sex worker, and we know things are always a bit different for wealthier class of women. So it's reported that when their marriages didn't work, meaning the wealthier class of women, one of the top preferences was for them to be widowed. This showed the women in a more favorable light, and they would now have resources to survive and a clean reputation to go with it. So basically, back during this time, the era of this story where Toffana was surviving and living, things were really hectic for women, okay? They couldn't just necessarily get up and go or buy things as they pleased. They were at the mercy of their lovers, okay? Everything came down from their spouse. Everything is what was their husbands doing. They were only considered really notable and noble, or even they wouldn't even get attention if they weren't married. Now, the women who were unwed and they had to survive, the only really incomes that they could make was to be a sex worker. But even if they were a sex worker, there was no humility there. There was no respect there. There was no admiration there. And it was pretty much like a feeling almost of the hopelessness, right? People are doing what they have to do to survive and sustain, but the respect and merit was all gone. It's kind of how, society views people who they consider in the less desirable professions, okay? So that would be the people out there, of course, being sex workers, or people out there, selling different things to survive a side of intimacy, whether it be, different recreational drugs or anything else, anything that you can think of where they would consider them a lower class. Yeah, that's where those women were housed. So for the other women who were considered of, the upper echelon, they were wealthy because they were married and their husbands were making this money. So for them, it would be considered unhonorable for them at that time for them to not have a husband. Okay, so those women who had the husbands, they took all this crap and all this behavior because they didn't want society to shun them as they were known to shun the other women. I hope you guys are following me here. So it's reported that when the wealthier women, right, the upper echelon, that when their marriages did not work, one of the top preferences was for them to be widowed, right? This showed the women in a more favorable light. And they would now have the resources to survive and a clean reputation to go with that, right? So yes, I know I read that part. I read it again to make sure that you guys understood why I said it before. So they wouldn't, if their husbands, the wealthier women, if their husbands just fell out and passed out on the street, they would give them no honor. They would give them no honor. If their husbands would be hit by a train or a car and they passed that way, the women would have no honor at all, and they would have no resources, because what would happen is if they had, families or anything else like that, they would try to take up the resources that belong to the wife because of that. Oh, he was hit by a train. We have insurance on him, all this other stuff. They would try to take the money that way. So it was believed that Toffana sold a poison called Aqua Tofana, supposedly invented by Theophania d'Amour, who was reported to have been Toffana's mother. Reported to have been her mother. Okay? A little backstory on Theophina. Now, she died July the 12th, 1633. She was executed for having poisoned her late husband, a guy by the name of Franciscois d'Amour, for having trafficked in illegal and for having trafficked in illegal lethal poison. So Toffana's mother, okay, was a woman named Theophania. Okay. Now Theophania, she poisoned her husband, right? She poisoned her husband. It was believed because he wasn't a good man to her. It was believed because he cheated on her, he abused her, and it was a whole bunch of different things why she just didn't feel like she could live with him anymore. So she decided to go ahead and get rid of him. Now, the poison that she allegedly used to get rid of her husband, she passed down what that poison entailed to her daughter, Toffana. And Toffana then picked up that trait and started moving forward with it. Okay? So back to her mother, Theophania. Now, like I said, she was executed for having poisoned her late husband and for having trafficked in illegal poison. Now, after she poisoned her husband and they said, yeah, it was poison, they figured it out. Back then they had extremely limited resources for figuring things out. And they relied heavily on, to this day, just word of mouth, okay? So it was equivalent if somebody accused or they even heard of something, they didn't have to know it to be true. They jumped on a pony and ran that pony all the way down the street with, it has to be true because so-and-so down the block said it. And this is kind of how this thing kind of unfolded a bit. It was word of mouth. People were talking, right? So they said, the reports suggest that she was preceded by Francisca Lysandra, who was executed for having trafficked in illegal poison the year prior. So Francisca was supposed to be Theophania's her partner in crime for basically bringing in illegal poison within a certain area and then distributing the poison out to other areas. So it was kind of like an underground gang, if you will. Okay, these women, they knew each other and they had a secret society within a society. Okay, and they knew which men and which families were considered the domestic abusers. They knew which ones who were assaulting the women, and not just the women but the kids as well. See, quiet as kept, a lot of that stuff that was happening to the wives, it wasn't just happening to the wives, it was happening to the children as well. But because the law was 100% like for only the men out there, women were not allowed to like speak up and say what was going on with them like that. It was a lot of stuff that was left unknown. Okay, they weren't allowed to say, this filthy bastard has been harming me and our kids and this and that. The law was not here for that. They said a woman's place is to sit down, cross her legs, and close her lips. Okay, and if there's something that needs to be said, somebody go get her husband so he could speak for her. Right? So where did that leave the rest of the women who didn't have a husband? They left the women with saying, you go find a man to speak for you. Or basically, if you don't find a man to speak for you, we can't take your word as valid. It was a lot of stuff like that was going on back then. Okay? So these two women were accused to have sold poison and Palamo. Excuse my pronunciation. Both of these women, Toffana's mother and the other lady, were accused of selling poison and Palamo. The case attracted a lot of attention, and an investigation was conducted on the orders of Fernando Alfred Ribera. Okay. Aqua Tofana was a poison that was sold to women who wanted to murder their abusive husbands, right? Now, what's interesting is I'm not sure where they got the name Aqua Tofanas because Toffana is the woman who we're doing this true crime about. And of course, aqua, just means water and in what I believe in Spanish, it just means water. Okay, so Aqua Tofana, and the name was given by her mother, so that's really interesting how they did that. Anyhow, now this poison was described as limpid, harmless, It was described as a limpid, harmless looking liquid. It was also said that a scant 4 to 6 drops was sufficient to destroy a man. So this scant, this excuse me, I'm sorry. So this limpid, harmless looking liquid, all it took was 4 to 6 drops to kill a man. 4 to 6 drops, not to kill a man per se, but to destroy him from the inside out. So to kill him over time, yes, not immediately, but over time. Now, its principal ingredient was arsenic. And while its use spread throughout much of southern Italy, it was typically administered by women to their husbands, most commonly in order for them to come into their fortunes. Now, poison was often known as inheritance powers. Okay, so the women who said, you know what, I'm tired of this dude laying next to me. He's been abusive. He's been mean. He's been saying vicious, rude things. And you know what? I've had enough. Me and the kids have had enough. There's no other way. But I know if I try to divorce him or leave him, he gets everything. I get nothing besides the short end of the stick, and told basically you can go be a sex worker if you want to make money from here on out, because you're going to get nothing. Right? So either I can do this, or I can take another approach. I can leave and try to find a will and a way to kind of get some money on my own. But the pickings were very slim. It didn't look very probable that was like the best end result. So these women, like I said, it was like an underground game now. Okay? They were saying, if you were able to get rid of your abuser / husband, okay, because from my understanding, it wasn't happening to the good husbands out there, okay, the ones who were loving their families, protecting them, paying the bills and all that other good stuff. It wasn't happening to them. It was just the guys who were really abusive, verbally and physically, and the ones who were really being a harm, not just to their families, but even in their communities, okay. That's who this poison was really affecting, okay. But it was known as the inheritance powers. That was how they start labeling. Oh, you want to get your inheritance? Okay, well, it's time to get a little something going. Now, in the course of what? Okay, in the course of a career that lasted for more than 50 years, Toffana and her gang were able to use this poison to dispose of at least 600 victims, okay? Now, keep in mind, 600 victims is a lot of victims. But over 50 years, let's put that in retrospect, okay? That's not a lot of people who actually died by poison, In 50 years, for 600 people, the number by itself is a lot. But if you say over a 50-year span, it's clear that they were not just killing guys left and right, okay? Things were happening. And keep in mind, this was all over Italy. It was spreading all over Italy about the secret gang of how to make things happen. But, it was still a lot. It was definitely a lot of people it was a lot of men who died. I don't think that number was as high, as other rates if we were to compare it back then. But anyhow, Toffana and her gang were able to use this poison to dispose of at least 600 victims. Their secret was well kept for all those years by a widening group of satisfied clients. So all the women who had used that poison, the Aqua Tofana, to go ahead and it was the arsenic, to go ahead and to kill these husbands of theirs, they were coming back and they would say it worked like a charm. It worked. That's what they came back and said. Signed, sealed, delivered. They was doing a thumbs up, walking by down the street, winking the eye. Not literally, but they could have been literally doing it. I don't know. But anyways, they were saying it worked, okay? So according to a person named Abe Galilani, a worldly wise gambler and wit who wrote a century or so later, there was not a lady in Naples who had not some of it lying openly on her toilette amongst her perfumes. She alone knows the bottle and can distinguish it. So this was this guy, okay? He was a worldly wise gambler and everybody knew of him. So just basically he was very popular and famous at that time for being a worldly wise gambler, okay? And he had a wit about himself. And he said there wasn't a lady in Naples, okay, who didn't, basically her toiletry thing is where she has her makeup and perfume at, makeup or perfume, depending on who she was. And basically it was like a little bottle, and you guys should see a picture of the bottle about now. But it was a little bottle, and it was basically, if you didn't know what it was, you just wouldn't know what it was. And it was unmarked, and it was just kept up there where her stuff is. And generally back then, much like today, guys don't really go in their females' perfume, and they don't go in their lotions and makeup. Well, some guys do. Today they do. Back then they wouldn't dare. Okay, but so it was out of the way. It was in plain sight, yet out of the way. Light up the comments if you know what I mean. In plain sight, yet out of the way. And it was right there. So it was right at their disposal. So if at any time a guy started becoming abusive or aggressive or acting up, or just not just normal like arguments, but I mean vicious and violence and attacking and threatening and assault and all that other stuff, they just go ahead and say, no problem, would you like a glass of tea, honey? And get that magical 4 to 6 drops out at a time, and it will do its thing, right? Now, the poison was often administered in wine or tea or some other liquid, and had a scarcely noticeable effect. Now, all that means is that from the time that the tea, it didn't have a color, it didn't have a smell. So this is equivalent to somebody, if somebody was to give you, something as smooth as Gatorade, and they put extra something like water in it, you might not notice it at all, right? Because Gatorade's very light. I mean, it will thin it out a little bit, but it's not enough to the point where you're going to say something is 100% off here, right? So that's how that was. That's how the poison was. It was, you can barely even notice what was going on there. If at anything, you might think initially, I must be tripping. So anyhow, it's reported that the husband will become a little out of sorts initially. He felt weak and a little indisposed, okay, a little sick or whatever, and would eventually call in to a doctor, also known as a medical man, during that time. Now, this is generally how it happened after about the first dosage, right? He would feel a little sick, okay, a little out of sorts, felt a little bit weak, okay, and then he would say, hey, honey, you know what? Go ahead and call that medicine man for me. Go ahead and call him, because I'm not feeling too well, okay? After the second dose of poison, this weakness and fatigue became more pronounced. The woman who expressed so much anxiety for her husband's health wouldn't be an object of suspicion, and she would likely continue to prepare her husband's food as prescribed by the doctor. So by the second dose, the husband, he's like, hey, you know what, go ahead, talk to the doctor again, because you know what, let him know that the medicine he's giving me, I don't really think it's working. Maybe he missed something out. Maybe he gave me the wrong dosage or something, right? And then the wife, when she talks to the medicine man, she would be saying, oh my God, please, you have to help him. You got to help him. What is, he's been not feeling well. I need him to be back to himself. We love him. We're so worried about him. Somebody please do anything. And so the doctor would look at her and be like, she's distraught, And so because he would think that she was distraught, well, he didn't think nothing was going on. He was thinking, just a woman concerned about her husband, or just a wife concerned about her husband, right? Okay. So yeah, the doctor would tell the wife, continue to make him soups. Don't let him eat heavy meals. Make sure he's getting his rest. Try not to nag him. If he wants something, just get it for him, right? So that's kind of the advice that the medicine man will be giving to the wife at that point, right? So in this way, the third drop would be administered. So now the wife has access, because remember, after the first drop, she called the medicine man like her husband asked. After the second drop, the medicine man said, okay, this is a little weird, but I want you to continue to do this, and make sure just to feed him, like soups. Don't give him solid food, Let's see if his body starts taking to the medicine that way, right? So in this way, the third drop would be administered and would have the most vigorous man laid flat out on his face. So by the third time that the wife was able to give that medicine, by the third time the wife was able to give that medicine, the husband's body would start breaking down from the inside. It would start breaking down his muscles, his bones, his strength would immediately start depleting. And it's like, okay, the strongest, most brawniest man would be completely laid flat on his face, unable to get up, unable to take care of himself, and will be completely dependent at the mercy of his wife at that point. That's how powerful that poison became over time. Now, the doctor would be completely puzzled, okay, and to see that that the apparently simple ailment did not surrender to his drugs. Now, this is because the doctor thought it to be a simple ailment. When the doctor was originally called, he would be thinking like, oh, it must be a stomach infection or a virus or something else like that, and that it'll be over soon or something else. Now, also, I should mention that back in that time, syphilis was like the scariest disease known to man or woman. It took many lives, okay? So if somebody ever thought that a person was sick from syphilis, they thought that to be like, I guess, whatever the biggest disease you can think of this day and time, that would be syphilis back then, okay? But they would also think, oh, it was the unclean, the unfaithful disease, okay? So anyways, the doctor would be surprised that the husband's body wouldn't surrender to the drugs, and while he was still being the dark to its nature, okay, meaning that he was still unaware that the husbands were being poisoned, okay. Other doses would be given until at length death would claim the victim. So the doctor would keep telling the wife, okay, well, I'm stumped. I have no idea what's going on here. His body's not reacting, like it should normally, like everybody else that I treat, his body's not reacting. So, he would be stumped. And then, over time, the husband would succumb to the poison. He would just succumb to the poison and he would die. So according to one version of events, Toffana fled to Rome and set up a poisoning ring that began to sell this poison to women who wanted to escape abusive or inconvenient spouses. Okay, so one version of events said she turned around and fled to Rome. She left Italy and went to Rome. Okay, now they said the reports suggest that there may have been 6 women in this poisoning ring active in the 1650s, including a woman by the name of Giulia Tofana, who took over after Toffana's death. Now, after Toffana had passed away, they said that this lady named Giulia Tofana was the one who took over this poisoning ring. Now, Toffana's involvement in all of this is not confirmed, okay? The only recorded evidence of poisoning activities being the execution of Toffana, which is Toffana's mother, okay, who was executed in 1633, and Giulia Tofana, and I know that I butchered her name, in 1659, she was believed to be Toffana's daughter, okay? So they never could pin it on Toffana directly, but what they did do is say, well, her mother, she was convicted of poisoning her husband, so they executed her, and then her daughter, they said that she took over, and they convicted her of poisoning in 1659. Now, historians point to Toffana dying in her sleep in 1651 with no one aware of her poisoning activities. This is what they believe happened to Toffana. However, confusion of her activities with other poisoners active in the area have led to tales that she actually died in 1659, in 1709, or 1730, which makes me believe they have no idea when Toffana actually died, and they don't know from the time that she allegedly fled to Rome what happened to her. They really don't know that. So she's like a magician of escape, okay, at this point. So with further elaboration that she took sanctuary in a convent and continued to manufacture and distribute poison for many years until she was found, executed, and her body thrown over the wall of a church that had provided her sanctuary. So that's another presumption, is that she ran to Rome, she got it as a part of a church, and she continued to manufacture the poisoning until the church members found out, wait a minute, you're a poisoner? And then they threw her out of the covenant and they killed her. That was another assumption of what actually happened to Toffana. Now, you guys let me know your thoughts on this true crime. I know I was a little bit all over the place and tongue-tied and everything else, and I was just trying to give you guys the tea on what I found out about Toffana. Anyhow, that's all that I have for you guys today. I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. Let me know, light up the comments and let me know if you guys have ever heard of this true crime. If you guys are new here, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Tell anyone and everyone that your girls out here telling you guys true crime stories about stories you guys might have never heard about. And if you did, I may have told you something that you didn't know that part happened in the story. Anyways, I hope that you guys have enjoyed this video. Please feel to give me a thumbs up if you would like to see more of these. Like I always say, there's always another story to be told, but for now,